My name's Aaron. I'm 36 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I still believed, naively, that family would never cross certain lines. That there were some invisible boundaries you just didn't touch. But as I learned at this year's family reunion, blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Sometimes it means entitlement. Sometimes it means betrayal dressed up in a smile and a hug. The reunion was my idea this year. It had been too long since we'd all been together. The last few years had scattered us across states and cities, jobs, kids, life. So I offered to host it at the cabin up in Pine Hollow, the one I'd bought with my bonus 2 years ago and renovated slowly during my weekends. Nobody knew I owned it. I just said I'd found a great rental spot and would cover the cost. I wanted it to be a surprise. Something good. Something unifying. My sister Leah and her husband, Mitch, arrived first with their 2 kids. Mitch gave me that firm handshake men do when they're trying to establish dominance, but I brushed it off. He'd always been a bit smug, a finance guy who lost his job during the tech layoffs and never quite got back on his feet. Leah was her usual self, warm, distracted, always playing peacekeeper between her husband and everyone else. Over the next few hours, the rest trickled in. My cousins from Denver, my aunt and uncle from Portland, even my dad flew in from Arizona. There were too many cars to count, too many hugs, too many casseroles shoved into the fridge. But for a moment, I felt like it was worth it. We were together again. The weekend unfolded the way these things usually do: barbecue smoke in the air, kids running barefoot through pine needles, wine bottles popping open as the sun dipped behind the trees. I handled most of the logistics: grill duty, towel distribution, grocery runs. No one asked who paid for anything. No one even thought to offer. That was fine. I wasn't doing it for recognition. I just wanted to see everyone laugh again. But Sunday night, something started to feel off. We just wrapped up a group photo by the lake, and I'd gone back inside to grab my camera bag. I keep a folder in it, one of those zippered, weatherproof pouches for receipts, emergency cash, and unfortunately, my business debit card. When I opened it, I felt it immediately. The pouch was thinner. I counted twice. Then a third time. $6,200 was gone. Clean. No receipts missing. Just the cash. I froze, standing there in the hallway as the laughter from the fire pit drifted through the screen door. My first thought was denial. Maybe I miscounted. Maybe I left it somewhere. But I knew I hadn't. I always kept my emergency fund there. Labeled. Crisp. I stared at the empty space in the folder and felt something shift in me, like a wire pulled too tight finally snapped. I didn't say anything that night. Not yet. I barely slept, lying in the cabin's guest room with my eyes open, staring at the wood-paneled ceiling, going over everything. Who had been inside? Who had touched my bag? My mind kept circling back to Mitch. He was the only one who had been alone in the cabin during the grocery run Saturday. Said he stayed back because his knee was acting up. Leah confirmed it. I'd brushed it off then, but now it burned in my head like a flashing light. The next morning, everyone gathered for breakfast before packing up. Fluffy pancakes, bacon, syrup, like nothing had happened. I stirred my coffee and waited. And when Mitch leaned back in his chair, sipping orange juice and cracking a joke about how expensive lakeside groceries must be these days, I locked eyes with him. I waited until the kids left the table. Then I spoke. "I'm missing some money," I said, calm and even. Quite a bit of it. It was in a folder in my camera bag. Only a few people had access to the cabin when the rest of us were out. The table quieted. My aunt blinked. My cousin set her fork down. Leah's face tightened like a balloon that had been stretched too far. Mitch didn't even blink. He leaned forward with that infuriating half-smile of his and said, "Well, maybe it's time for a little redistribution, huh? I mean, we've been struggling, Aaron. You make more than all of us combined. Maybe it's time someone else got a break." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just reached into my backpack and pulled out the folder. Still zipped. Still neat. I laid it on the table. "Then you'll understand what happens now," I said quietly. They thought I was bluffing. Mitch let out a sharp laugh and shook his head. "Come on, man. Don't be dramatic. We're family." Leah tried to jump in. "Aaron, I'm sure there's an explanation we can talk about." But then it happened. A thunderous slam came from the front door. It burst open so hard it rattled the windows. The entire table jumped. The room went dead silent. And standing there in the doorway, silhouetted against the morning light, was the last person they ever expected to see. And he wasn't alone. He had a badge, a warrant, and a very personal reason for being there. My jaw clenched as I stood, watching the color drain from Mitch's face, watching Leah grip the edge of the table like it might stop the room from spinning. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just watched the past 24 hours finally catch up to them. And that was only the beginning. The man in the doorway was Detective Marlowe. Not just any detective, he was a longtime family friend. His daughter, Camilla, used to come to our 4th of July picnics when we were kids. He'd coached our little league team for one summer when our usual coach got sick. I hadn't seen him in nearly a decade, not since his retirement from the city force. But here he stood, not retired anymore. Not casual. This was business. He held up a folder in one hand and a badge in the other. "Aaron," he said, nodding once. Then he turned to the rest of the table. "I'd like to speak to Mitchell Lane." Now, the air in the room turned thick. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Mitch blinked, trying to find his balance. But his usual charm didn't work here. "Detective, Marlowe, right? This must be a misunderstanding. We're just having breakfast." "Then you won't mind stepping outside." Marlowe cut him off. His voice was firm, but not loud. That made it worse somehow. He wasn't here to make a scene. He was here for results. I stayed seated, eyes locked on Leah. She looked like she was seeing a ghost, her hand trembling slightly as she clutched her coffee mug. Mitch stood slowly, his fork clattering onto the plate as he backed away from the table. Marlowe stepped aside to let him pass. Then 2 other officers entered behind him, quiet and focused, and followed Mitch outside. The screen door clicked shut behind them. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees outside and the quiet pop of the fireplace settling. My aunt finally broke the silence. "Aaron, what is going on?" I took a breath, then stood and pulled a few papers from the folder. I didn't want to involve anyone outside the family. I began, my voice steady. But this wasn't just missing cash. Mitch didn't just take money. He crossed a line he knew I couldn't ignore. That folder didn't just have cash. It had security credentials for one of my company's encrypted test environments. He took photos of them, tried to use them, failed. But that alone was enough to trigger our internal red flags. My cousin gasped. "Wait, you're saying he tried to hack your work?" I nodded. "Or sell access. Which is worse?" I didn't want to believe it at first. I wanted to think it was just the money. But our systems logged an external breach attempt Sunday night, tied directly to a device pinging off this cabin's Wi-Fi. We flagged it, tracked the MAC address, and I got the call that night. Leah covered her mouth. "Oh my God. He didn't just steal from me," I said. "He compromised my work, my job, my security clearance. I could have lost everything." "But why didn't you say anything sooner?" my uncle asked. "I wanted to see if he'd own up to it. Give him a chance." He didn't. And when he made that little redistribution comment, I knew. From the porch, muffled voices could be heard. Marlowe speaking calmly, Mitch's tone rising in pitch. A thud. Another officer's voice, firmer now. Leah stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. "Aaron, please, there has to be another way. He made a mistake. We can fix this. Don't let them take him. The kids, they need their father." I looked at her. I really looked. For a moment, I remembered being 8 years old, hiding behind her in the hallway when we were kids and our parents were fighting. I remembered how she always protected me from bullies, how she made me grilled cheese sandwiches when I came home from college, exhausted and broke. But that Leah hadn't stood up for me when Mitch stole from me. That Leah hadn't apologized. She had stayed quiet, complicit. And now, when faced with consequences, her first concern was Mitch, not the damage he'd done. "You should have thought about that before he crossed the line," I said quietly. "You don't get to hurt someone and then play the victim when they push back." Before she could respond, the screen door opened again. Mitch was back inside, his wrists cuffed in front of him, flanked by the 2 officers. "They have no proof," he barked. "It's all made up. This is a setup." Marlowe followed behind, eyes unreadable. He handed me a small slip of paper. It was my original handwritten serial record for the cash bundle. We used it to track transactions for our internal emergency funds. "Your notes match the serials we found in his bag," Marlowe said simply. "It's enough for now." Mitch's face went pale. "You went through my bag? You can't just." "I can when there's a signed complaint," Marlowe said, "which Aaron filed last night. You don't get to do this." Mitch shouted. "You're just some tech nerd who thinks he's better than the rest of us." "No, I said calmly. I'm the guy who paid for this entire weekend so you could eat, sleep, and laugh while plotting how to stab me in the back. He struggled, turning toward Leah. Say something. Tell them this is crazy. But Leah just stood there, her face frozen in some unreadable mix of disbelief, guilt, and maybe, finally, regret. The officers moved toward the door. Marlowe gave me one last look and a nod of quiet respect. This isn't over, Mitch shouted as they stepped outside again. You'll regret this, Aaron. You think you're untouchable? You're not. The screen door slammed shut again. And this time, the silence in the cabin was absolute. No one moved. No one said a word. I sat back down, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding for 3 straight days. But this wasn't the end. Because Mitch had left behind more than just damage. He'd left behind secrets. Ones that were about to unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. And when I finally opened that second folder in my bag, the one he clearly didn't see, what I found changed everything. Even now, I'm not sure how deep this goes. But I'm about to find out. The second folder had always been there, zipped behind a fabric divider I used for backup documents. I only kept it there because it was the safest place I could think of, far from my apartment, hidden in plain sight among camping receipts and allergy meds. No one, not even my assistant back at the firm, knew about it. That folder held printouts of encrypted communication logs from an internal investigation at my company, something I'd been quietly assisting with for months. At first, the case had nothing to do with my personal life. It was purely professional, an anonymous leak of test architecture for one of our pending government contracts. My team had traced fragments of the data outside our usual servers, pinging suspicious IP addresses, most of them dead ends. But 3 weeks before the reunion, a new signal had emerged. Not just from my company's environment, but from a residential network. The twist? That IP originated from my hometown, a suburb just 20 minutes away from the house I grew up in. I'd only printed out the logs because part of me, call it paranoia, or maybe just instinct, wanted a physical copy in case everything went sideways. What Mitch didn't know, and what even I hadn't realized until I sat there with my hands trembling on the zipper, was that his name might not have been the only one involved. I opened the folder. On the second page, there it was, a login record. The username was nonsense, a randomized alias. But the MAC address, the digital fingerprint, matched another one from last year. I scanned further down. Another match. Then another. And just like that, the timeline started to form in my head. The signal hadn't only come from the cabin. It had originated much earlier, months ago, from a location registered under the name Lane C. I froze. C. Mitch didn't have a sibling named C, but he had a cousin, Cameron. Mitch's cousin Cameron had always been the overlooked one in the family, quiet, awkward, the guy who sat 2 seats away and nodded politely when you offered him bread. He worked in IT, nothing high profile, some local firm in Sacramento. I hadn't seen him in a year. He wasn't even invited to this reunion. But his last appearance? A barbecue at Leah and Mitch's house. 4 months ago, I pulled out the envelope taped to the back of the folder, photos, timestamp screenshots, and most damning of all, a network map showing 5 ping relays. One at Cameron's apartment, one at a co-working space near Leah and Mitch's old address, one from Mitch's previous employer, the one he was fired from. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just greed. It was a funnel. And the man I'd just had arrested for stealing cash might have been part of something much bigger, something criminal. But maybe not the leader. I stood up slowly, gripping the folder as if it might vanish if I let go. Leah was still standing, arms folded, her eyes red and glossy. I approached her. I need to ask you something, I said, quieter now. She looked up. What? How long has Cameron been coming around the house? Her brow furrowed. Not in months. Since maybe April? What? I didn't answer her. Not yet. I walked toward the corner of the living room where my laptop bag sat half-zipped. I pulled out my hard drive, connected it, and opened the backup logs. As expected, I found the same timestamps from the initial leak. The only thing I hadn't done yet was cross-reference them against physical locations. But now I had something better. I turned to the rest of the family, who had started shifting uncomfortably in their seats. My uncle whispered something to my aunt. My cousin texted under the table. Everyone was uneasy, but they still didn't understand the scope of what was happening. I need everyone to stay, I said, trying to keep the tension from cracking my voice. This isn't just about stolen cash anymore. My dad looked up from his seat by the fireplace, concern etched into the wrinkles around his mouth. Aaron, son, what exactly are you saying? I looked at him, then at Leah, then at the folder in my hand. I think Mitch wasn't working alone, and I think someone else here knows more than they've let on. Dead silence. Then, from the far corner of the room, came a slow, deliberate cough. Everyone turned. Uncle Rick. He shifted forward in his chair and said, "That's a heavy accusation, Aaron." My pulse spiked. I didn't name anyone. "But you were about to," he said. I stared at him. Something in his tone didn't match the usual uncle with a bad back vibe. He sounded rehearsed. "I'm sorry," I said. "Why are you so defensive?" He tilted his head. "You always had a way of making mountains out of molehills." Leah cut in, voice hoarse. "Wait, Rick, why are you talking like this?" Rick looked at her, then at me, and exhaled like a man resigning to the fact that a secret was about to unravel, whether he liked it or not. "I told Mitch to drop it," he said finally. "I told him it was too risky." The room went still again. My vision tunneled. I took a step closer. "Drop what?" Rick reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small USB stick. He placed it on the coffee table with a soft clink. "I told him he could skim small things. Get by. But you? You were the golden goose. The one who always paid. Always showed up. You practically asked for it." My mouth went dry. "Are you saying you encouraged this?" "I'm saying," he said, leaning back, "that you don't build a family empire on pride alone. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to survive." "You're not surviving," I said, barely holding back. "You're leeching. Off your own blood." Rick shrugged. "That's just business, kid. You wouldn't understand." I stared at the USB drive, then at the faces of the people I grew up with. My cousin still texting nervously, my aunt frozen in shock, my father shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. The layers were peeling back faster than I could process. And suddenly, I wasn't just looking at a stolen $6,200 anymore. I was looking at a conspiracy, one that went deeper than I'd ever imagined. And the worst part? It was only just beginning. I stared at the USB drive lying on the coffee table like it was radioactive. The entire room was silent except for the soft hiss of the fireplace. Uncle Rick leaned back in the armchair like he hadn't just admitted to orchestrating a scheme that violated both family trust and multiple federal laws. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it echo in my ears. Leah sat down slowly, as if her knees had finally given up, her hands shaking in her lap. "You were stealing from me?" I asked, voice low and flat, staring at Rick. Rick didn't flinch. "Not from you. From the system. From a man who thought he was above the rest of us. You're not a victim, Aaron. You just got smart and made money. The rest of us? We got left behind. So you decided to take what you didn't earn." He rolled his eyes. "Spare me the righteousness. I made sacrifices for this family. When your dad bailed on the construction loan, who stepped in to co-sign? Me. Who helped Mitch and Leah with their down payment? Me. You kids think success is owed to you just because you landed in the right career." I turned toward my dad, who looked pale and small in his chair, like the truth had aged him in minutes. "Is that true?" I asked. Dad didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and whispered. I didn't know what they were doing, but I didn't believe him. Not anymore. Rick leaned forward. "Look, you can blow this up, sure. Get everyone arrested. Humiliate Leah. Wreck what little's left of the family. But that makes you the villain, Aaron. Not us." I knelt slowly, picked up the USB, and slipped it into my laptop without a word. The files popped open immediately. Encrypted logs. Exported spreadsheets. Email drafts between Rick and Mitch. A copied chain with Cameron's name on it. IP addresses. Routing data. And, finally, payment receipts, small amounts, funneled to prepaid cards over the past 6 months. The amounts were too specific to be random. They weren't laundering, they were siphoning. And they were good at it. But they weren't good enough. I copied the folder to my drive, then turned to the rest of the room. My aunt, eyes glassy. My cousin, gone pale. Leah was silently weeping now, her hands covering her face. She still hadn't said a word to defend her husband. Maybe because somewhere deep down, she knew. She just didn't want to admit it. I took a breath. I gave everyone here the benefit of the doubt. I assumed the best. I let myself believe that love and loyalty meant something. But this, I held up the USB. This is betrayal. On a level I didn't think any of you were capable of. Rick smirked. That same smug look Mitch had worn. And what now? You call the cops? Press charges? Watch the whole family go up in smoke. I tilted my head. No. He blinked. No. I already did. A knock at the door. 3 hard pounds. Everyone jumped. I didn't flinch. I walked over and opened it. Detective Marlowe stepped in again. Only this time, he wasn't alone. 2 agents followed him. Suits. Department of Homeland Security. And behind them, 2 uniformed officers with body cams already rolling. Mr. Lane, one of the DHS agents, said as she stepped forward, her tone clipped and professional. You're being detained for questioning in connection to a federal cybersecurity breach involving a government defense contractor. Rick shot to his feet. You can't. This is a private family gathering. The agent flashed a thin smile. And you've been on our radar for months. Thanks to your nephew's cooperation, we now have enough to pursue federal charges. Rick's face turned the color of wet cement. Leah stood up, crying now. No, no. Please, he's my uncle. My kids. I turned to her. You knew Mitch was stealing. You might not have known the rest, but you knew enough. And you said nothing. You let him dig this hole. Don't expect me to pull him out. The agents cuffed Rick and read him his rights while my aunt began sobbing softly into a napkin. The others just stared, stunned. As the officers moved toward the door with Rick in tow, the second DHS agent turned to me and nodded. We'll need your full statements and digital copies. You've done the right thing. I know, I said quietly. They left with Rick, the door closing behind them with a finality that echoed in the cabin's wooden walls. Silence returned, but it was different now, hollow, broken. I walked over to the table and picked up the folder again. The weight of it felt different now, heavier, but somehow cleaner. Leah walked up behind me. Her voice was small, barely audible. What happens to Mitch? I didn't turn around. That depends on what else they find on his devices. But he's not walking away. I didn't know, Aaron. I swear to God. I finally turned. Her eyes were red, puffy. She looked like a shell of the sister I grew up with. I want to believe you, I said. But I don't know what to believe anymore. So you'll forgive me if I don't come to the next reunion. She winced like I'd slapped her. I didn't mean for any of this. No one ever does, I said, cutting her off. I grabbed my backpack and slung it over my shoulder. The others stayed frozen, unsure if they should follow me, speak to me, or just let me go. I gave them nothing, just silence. As I stepped out onto the porch, the air hit me like a clean slap. Cool, pine-scented, sharp. I walked down the path toward my car. Leaves crunched beneath my boots. And as I pulled open the driver's door, I paused. I looked back once, just once, at the cabin that had been filled with so much laughter just 48 hours ago. That same cabin now stood as a monument to a family I thought I knew, and the truth I could never unsee again. And maybe it was better this way, because sometimes cutting ties isn't cruelty, it's survival. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.